Hey guys, this is Automotive Chaos. I'm Ryan, and this is our 1956 Chevy. So if you guys have not been following along, we've been thrashing on this car for the last couple of months. Finally got it back on the frame after doing a one-piece floor in the last video. And today's focus is going to be toe boards and firewall. So there's a fair bit of undercoating that's still in the transmission tunnel. And we have a couple of patches to do up here as well. You can see right around here in the cowl area is a little crispy. That side a little better, but not much. And I want to get basically all of the wiring coming through out and just start with a fresh slate. Clean this up, get a nice coat of paint on it, and we'll be one step closer to getting this thing roadworthy. So the first thing I'm going to do, I think, is going to grab a torch, a scraper, and we'll start knocking some of this undercoating off. I'm probably going to wrap the frame too. I'll get something on there to protect that, grab the torch, and we'll get started. So the idea with this, hopefully, is to just soften that up a little bit so that when I come in with the scraper, it'll make it a little bit easier to remove. Now, I know I'm not going to get it surgically clean this way, but it should get the majority of this stuff off. And then if we have to, we can hit it with a degreaser, or even if I pressure wash it or something like that, that will minimize the amount of stuff that's still stuck on here. So keep working at it. See how it goes. Now, aside from generally just getting this cleaner so that I'm able to paint it, we also don't really want any of this stuff on here when I go to weld those toe board patches in, because that will make an absolute mess, and we risk catching it on fire too. And a couple months ago, if somebody had set this on fire, they probably would have been doing me a favor. But now, with the amount of work that we have into this car, I would prefer if it stayed in one piece. I have just about everything removed from the firewall. Got all the grommets out of the way. Still have to pull the bolts for the hood hinges out. Got the heater box. And then that bolt on the master cylinder decided to come loose from the brake pedal assembly. So these studs here are basically pressed into the brake pedal assembly, and then you just tighten the nuts up. But this one must have broken loose, so I'm gonna have to take the electric glue gun, throw a tack on the back of that one, and hopefully we'll be able to back it off after that. And I got a treat for you guys. This is okay for the heater box, right? And the blower motor. I think it's safe to say that we probably had a leak in the car at one time. They are destroyed, but I think I actually have an extra one, because this car did come with some extra parts, and there was a blower motor in there when I picked it up. And I thought that was kind of weird, but it's starting to make sense now. So I'm going to weld that stud on to the brake pedal assembly, we'll get that nut off, and yeah, I think we can start cutting out our toe boards. It's a new day. Got the master cylinder off. I ended up having to cut that stud that was spinning. I tried welding it a couple of times and just couldn't get it to stick, but we got the old master cylinder out. Take a look at the push rod for the brake pedal. Even that's corroded and it's pretty nasty. I tried cleaning it up with a wire wheel and it's just so pitted. So add that to the list of things that we have to buy. It is time to start focusing on these toe boards. Now, I already cut out a good portion of the driver's side, and up here is in pretty good shape. It's really just slightly above where my finger is, and you can kind of see the daylight coming through there where that metal is rotted. I don't want to cut too much out of the car, especially because we have our dimmer switch here. I would rather not have to relocate that. As it is, our gas pedal, and there's also a bracket with a pulley on it for the emergency brake, is going to have to get relocated because the new panels do not have provisions for those. So I'm going to clean the surface rust off of this patch, and then what I think I'll do is I'll mark the panel basically where I want to cut it, and then we'll lay it in the car, make our mark on the existing toe board, and then we can start welding this thing in. But once I get the overall height figured out and get that trimmed up, then we'll start fitting it in and see how far over we want to go. And I believe on this side, I'm going to have to take the torch because there's undercoating on this side right here. But I think once we scrape the undercoating off, I believe this panel is spot welded to another piece inside the cowl. So hopefully if we can locate those and drill them out, then it shouldn't be too hard to remove the rest of this panel. But I'll start cleaning this piece up. We're going to treat this with weld-through primer like we have every other piece that we've done on this car. Start getting it fit in. Okay, I have my piece trimmed, obviously on either end. This patch panel was, well, it wasn't all the patch panel's fault. I have issues with angles sometimes, clearly. But the contour of the patch itself in these two corners was way off. So I have the majority of the piece covered. And then once I get this trimmed and welded in place, I'll come back and we'll make two closeout panels for these pieces in the corners. Not ideal, but it will be much better than what was in here before. So I threw a self-tapper there, and I have two clamps holding it to the flange on the floor underneath, so it's rock solid. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up and basically cut along the panel. Once I do that, I can take the self-tapper out, grind the edge to be welded, and then we can start getting this panel in place. Got both toe board patches done. I pulled everything out of the dashboard: speaker, glove box, radio, ashtray, ignition switch, wipers, headlights, you name it, pulled it out. I also cleaned up the back side of the firewall with a rust treatment and got a coat of paint on some of it, not all of it. And while I was working down there, I saw that. So this is actually rotted right through the cowl on the bottom. So I did order, bring you guys out front so you can see what piece I'm talking about. So this cowl piece that meets up to the firewall and behind the pillar here near the door, underneath, got a nice hole here, and this whole thing actually cracked all the way back to the seam. So I should have that piece in a couple of days, but in the meantime, I'm going to start drilling out some spot welds and remove this piece, and we'll get started on fixing what's behind there. There's been a lot of rust repair on this car so far, and it does not seem like there's an end in sight, but there has to be because I started in the back and worked my way forward. So it would make sense that we're almost done, but got to keep plugging away at this thing. And here's what we got. So this panel is separating at this flange that folds over the firewall here. We have that rot hole there, which I knew about because I was able to see that from the inside. This, I have to see if I can find a picture of one on a car that's still whole, but I feel like this probably sweeps up and acts as a channel to route the water down and out that hole that was in the stock panel. And more of the same thing down here. A little ugliness around the back of the door hinge as well. I'm in the fight of my life to get that vent out because that was all rotted out. I haven't been able to find a replacement one for that yet. Good times. So I'm going to keep working at this vent, try and get that out. I'm going to end up taking this channel out just so I have a little bit of a better idea of what I'm working with, or what I'm not working with really. And then I think the plan for this is going to be to remake this whole section. Just thinking it might be better to do it in pieces. We'll see what happens. I'll just keep cutting until there's nothing left, and then we'll rebuild from there. Well, that got out of hand pretty quickly. For the most part, I have all of the bad metal cut out. I still have to work on removing the other side of that vent. It was actually rotted out. So there is a plate, or this piece comes down, follows the inside of the rocker, and it actually gets sandwiched in between the door hinge, and it had rotted out all the way around there. So we're gonna have to remake that too. Definitely more than I thought, but I'm glad I opened it up. Not have been good to leave this all behind there. I'm gonna have to stop here, at least on this part, because I am waiting on fresh sheet metal to make up some patches, and I also ordered that new cowl cover, so that they sell. This whole structure in here I couldn't find. I checked a bunch of different websites, and it seems to be one of the few parts for these cars that is not made aftermarket. So if you guys know of anybody that makes them, let me know. It's a little too late, but be good to know for the next car, because inevitably I've learned nothing from this, so I'll end up doing it again. And for the next car, if it needs that kind of panel, it'd be nice to know that they make it. So I have 2 more spots that I want to take care of today before that sheet metal comes in. Oh, by the way, we still have to focus all this. I started doing some work in here, kind of just filling with good metal, grinding, filling, grinding, filling. They also make this pillar here, but it's about $600, and it includes the entire dog leg all the way down. And I don't think it's that bad. Plus, I don't want to mess with removing the VIN tag off this car. So while we're waiting for the sheet metal to come in to make the patch for the inner cowl, I want to take a couple minutes. Well, it'll probably be longer than that. But I want to address the rot that's along the firewall. So we have that spot, this one here, and then we got that little disaster right there. So I believe, from what I can see, it looks like this panel is spot welded, and it's possibly double layered. I'm not sure. But what I'll do is I'll just kind of mark out an area, drill out whatever spot welds are there, and then we'll just go ahead and make some nice small cuts, trace that onto a new piece of sheet metal, and then we can start tack welding that onto the firewall. So I'll get started. We'll drill out some spot welds and get to cutting. We got our section of bad metal cut out. I'll clean this flange up, get ready to be able to plug weld to that. We'll coat in there with some weld through primer, clean up the edges, and then we can start working on our patch. Well, it's countless hours later, but I have all of the patches that I wanted to get done on the firewall completed and out of the way. Got all fresh new metal in there. Everything on the back side has been covered in weld through primer. So this is the first patch that I cut out, fixed the small piece over here, and then all the way on the passenger side, got a patch welded in there as well. That one you probably won't even see because the fender and the inner fender are gonna cover that. But I feel much better knowing that it's all fresh metal in there and not just bondoed over. I wanna try and keep as much of that out of this car as possible. So, with that being said, next thing I'm going to do is just take a wheel. We're going to try and knock down as much of the old paint that we can. I want to get this in a coat of primer for today. I'll probably end up doing a little bit of finish work on all the patches, just a light layer of body filler We'll smooth that out. And then once I'm done with all of the welding on the driver's side cowl and around the windshield, which is going to be the next video, we'll come in and we'll get a nice fresh coat of paint on this. I still have to relocate the throttle pedal and that second pulley for the emergency brake system. We'll probably do that before we final paint the Firewall. But for now, one step closer. So I'm going to throw the wheel on the grinder, knock as much of this down as we can, get this in a coat of primer for the night, and hopefully we should have some sheet metal in a couple days to finish up that disaster on the driver's side. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. I know it seems like we're going backwards because of cutting the driver's side cowl out of the car. It's just the way it goes sometimes. But we did make a decent amount of progress on the Firewall, so I'm happy about that. Hopefully in the next couple of days I can start working on that patch for the cowl, get that new cap piece on, and finally move on to something else other than rust repair on this car. It feels like it's never ending, but we're getting there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Catch you soon.